Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Afro Millennial. If today is your first time tuning in, welcome. If you're coming back as a returning viewer, welcome. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you for coming back to watch this channel. In today's episode of the Afro Millennial, I'm going to talk about some challenges of doing business in Africa. In my last episode, I spoke about some 5 business ideas and I gave a bonus point of businesses that are likely to make you a lot of money in Africa. So this is like a continuation to last week's video. Africa is a very good business destination. People are investing in Africa, and I like to encourage people to take part in Africa's success story. But making money and doing business comes with its own risk. And the African landscape poses some special challenges that you wouldn't find in some other parts of the world where you decide to invest. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is the lack of government support. So for Africa, or for a continent that is made up of mostly developing countries, you'd think governments would support business people to help develop the economy. But find in many African countries that the governments, yes, I think most of these things come because of the rules and regulations that come with taking support from international bodies like the IMF, the World Bank, and all that. I think they could do better. Let me talk about taxes. Taxes are very high, business taxes. If you want businesses to thrive in a place, you want businesses to help develop your country, I think what the government should do is to reduce taxes for business people to be able to invest more, to attract more investments. But that's not the case. In African countries, businesses are taxed so much. And apart from the taxes, before you even start a business and running your business, there are so many bureaucracies, like the revenue services. They should I say, maybe I should use the word harass, because sometimes it goes as far as feeling like they do not want the businesses to succeed. I would partly blame that on the identification and documentation of businesses, legal businesses in the country, because they do not have access to enough information about the businesses going on. I'm talking about not all countries, some countries, I should say most, but because I'm not sure, I'll say some countries in Africa. They don't have information on taxpayers or people who can be taxed. So whoever is identified as a taxpayer is overburdened, in my opinion, because government spending depends mostly on tax money. So the few people that are identified as taxpayers are overtaxed, in my opinion, especially businesses. So all these things is that the government does not support businesses. Apart from that, taking taxes and complex bureaucracies. Like if you want something to be done for you by a government agency, like you need to register your business, the process you go through is discouraging. You go through a long process, you need to see this, you need to go here, like it's just daunting. So those are the things that might discourage people from doing business in Africa. And to top it all off, there's corruption in the government or in these institutions that are supposed to help you set up your business. And nobody in charge seems to be doing anything about it, right? So you go and then someone does not want to give you what you're supposed to get to start a business. It goes on and on. They drag it till you pay something. And that's just making starting business in Africa very hard, or doing business in Africa, because even after you start your business, you need these things. You have to keep to date with your permits and all that, and it's so hard to get these things done sometimes because of the civil servants in these institutions. And apart from that, the macroeconomic environment is harsh. Exchange rates are they are not favorable. Take the cedi, for example, like it keeps falling and falling. The naira, I've heard about the Zimbabwean currency, I think the Zimbabwean dollar, I'm not sure. Just inflation is out of control. Like all these things are some things that you're likely to face when doing business in Africa. This is not to discourage you. People are doing business and they are doing well, but it's good to have this information. It's good to be armed with this information before going in to start a business or putting in your money to start a business in Africa. You should know this, you should be prepared for this, and you should be able to, with the right information, with the right preparation, you should be able to overcome these things. But then these are things that are there that I think the government needs to work on these things. In Africa, or in most African countries, there's a problem of lack of credit. So you want to start a business, you need some capital to start with, and you try to borrow money from the banks. it's hard to get money from the banks or financial institutions. And if you do get that money, the interest rates are as high as 32% in some countries. How much profit will you make to be able to pay a loan with 32% interest? That's a big problem. So that's one of the reasons I think diasporans who are coming into the country do better in business than Africans living in Africa or living in African countries, because it's likely that the diasporans or the foreigners have access to credits from where they are coming from, maybe from the UK, from Australia, from the US. They have access to credit that they bring in to help them do their business. But take the case of someone who lives in Africa who has to borrow from an African bank and is starting off with a loan that has a 32% interest rate. Now, even if the business is making 100% profits, right? Well, not profits, but the returns. By the time you pay off all your debts, 32% goes to the bank. That alone, the reason why people in Africa are not able to do big business. It's not the lack of business ideas. They have the business ideas, but then the financial support to be able to implement these business ideas, to bring them to life, is one of the challenges African countries or the challenges of doing business in African countries. Now, well, this is also still related to the government. The government has a lot to do when it comes to encouraging people to invest in Africa, because there's also poor fiscal infrastructure and connectivity. So poor road networks. Let's say you want to invest in agribusiness. How do you transport your goods, or how do farmers transport their goods from rural areas to urban areas when the roads are so bad? The railway lines in some countries, in most countries, are not working. Like, the things that should facilitate business are not working. Talk about electricity. Most African countries are faced with power shortages, inefficient power provision, all these things. And electricity or power is like one of the basic things a business should have to be able to run properly or to run smoothly. And if there's shortage of power supply, power outages going here and off here and there, and businesses have to look for alternative sources of power, that's an extra expense. That's going to slow down things. If that alternative power source fails, that's going to affect production or whatever business activity the electricity or the power is used for. That slows down everything, and that makes doing business in Africa excessively expensive. Availability of internet services, or should I say affordable internet services, is also a problem. If you want to set up, you want to be able to communicate with your workers, you want to be able to communicate with your buyers, your suppliers, and all that. Internet is not as common as it should be, or as it's needed in Africa, because communication is everything. In the modern world, communication is everything. You should be able to contact people here and there. Yes, it's there, but then the price you pay to get internet for your business, I think it's very high. And all these are things that government can invest in to be able to help people do more businesses. Maybe I'm putting too much responsibility on the government, but I don't think it's the responsibility of the citizens or people who want to do business in the country. Like, these are things the government should say basic things. These are things that should be there to encourage growth, to encourage development. If we want to be developed, these are the things we should do. But all these things are not getting enough attention. Private people are the ones investing in such things. But if a private entity is investing in this, they are doing it for profits, and it's going to be expensive, and that's just going to increase the cost of doing business. So that's another challenge of doing business in Africa. Now, apart from that, last week in my video, I spoke about there being a young population and labor force. But problem with that is that labor force is not as skilled as you would find in other parts of the world, right? So let's say you want to set up a tech company, like a tech startup. When you go to an African country, in some African countries, there are a lot of tech people there, but a typical African country, when you go there, you'll find tech workers, tech experts there, but they are just a few who know what they are doing. But because they are just a few, they are expensive. Like, to get someone like that to work for you, it's expensive. If you look for someone who is not as skilled too, you'll have to go through the process of training the person, and all these add up to the challenges of doing business in Africa. They are not ready-made. Young people in Africa are smart. They are this, but maybe the education system is not preparing them well enough. So unless someone has had some exposure somewhere outside the education system or something, it's hard to get like highly skilled labor. If you're looking for basic blue collar work or something, that's in abundance. But then when it comes to highly skilled labor, it's going to be a challenge because there are just a few people who are, I'm just using tech as an example, but then maybe you want to do agro processing. People go to school for that, but then to use machines, complex machines and all that, you might have to go an extra step in training people and all that. So that's like another challenge when it comes to doing business in Africa. You might have to spend more on skilled or highly specialized labor. Maybe it's everywhere, but the prevalence might be higher in African countries than in other countries. Now, this last point is not, it's more of an advice. Okay, so this point came about as a result of a video I watched. Someone who moved from the UK to Gambia, I think, was talking about a business idea, which I thought was a brilliant business idea. She was talking about hospital food business. So she said she went to the hospital and she realized that in the UK, you go to the hospital provides you food, this, that. But when she went to the West African country, I think it's Gambia, she didn't see that. Like, she thought that would be a good thing to start, like provide hospital food, provide this, that. It's a very good idea, but I didn't think it was a good fit for Africa, for an African country or a West African country. Let me make it more specific. Maybe in other countries it might work. Maybe in a private hospital it will work, but in a government hospital, in Africa, bills are paid upfront. Healthcare is not free. You go to the hospital, they're taken care of, you have to pay. So every single thing that you take from the hospital, you have to pay for it upfront in cash. So this food business idea is a very brilliant business idea everywhere else or in many places, but not in African countries. So the problem with that is that when this, especially for people who are coming in from other countries to invest in Africa, what might seem like a good idea wherever you are coming from might not work in the African country you are going to. So you need extra business intelligence or like you need to do extra research before you try to implement your business idea, before you put your resources into, in your opinion, into bright business ideas that might fail woefully. So it's like the market is there, but if you don't take care, you're going to start a business that does not have a place in Africa. So you have to do extra research, economic terrain, the social environment, everything. You have to take all that into consideration. It's not the same as in other places. So this is mostly, this point is mainly for foreigners coming in to invest in Africa. So these are some points I thought about when I thought about the challenges of doing business in Africa. The list is far from exhaustive. So please comment in the comment section if you have other challenges that you want other people to know about doing business in Africa, the obstacles or the hurdles you have to go over if you want to do business in Africa. We want people to invest in Africa, but then we don't want them to come, or we don't want people living in Africa to invest and feel. So this is just a platform to provide as much information as possible. I don't talk only about business. I talk about social issues, things that affect Africans, people of African descent who want to go back to Africa, who want to invest in Africa, or people who have moved out of Africa who are trying to make it in other places. I just get the conversation going. So I appreciate your comments. Please leave a comment in the comment section. Join the conversation. Help someone who might need some information to move to Africa, to start a business in Africa, and all that. So thank you again for joining me in today's episode. Thank you for staying to the end. If you found the information in this video helpful, press the like button, share to your friends or your family who might find the information in this video useful. And also don't forget to subscribe to my channel. The more you subscribe, the more my reach expands, and the more people see this video. You like, people see it. You share, people see it. You subscribe, more people see it. So yes, please do all these things and let's get the conversation going. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in my next episode. Bye-bye.